This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party and the vice chair of New York State Republican Party. Our good friend and guest, esteemed lawyer, commentator, and essayist, Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. This is Let the Record Show. Today is 9/11/24. 9/11/24, which makes it 23 years after that horrific event. People call it a tragedy. It wasn't a tragedy. It was an assault, an attack, an act of war against the United States. A tragedy is an accent. This was no accent. This was extremist, Islamic fundamentalists dedicated to the destruction of America. Now, let me give you some thoughts, and I'll turn this over to Jesse, then to Eric. These are my thoughts. I was there at City Hall that day. I know what happened. I saw what happened. I was there at Ground Zero. I was there with Speaker Peter Vallone when we went to the armories and the other centers with the pictures of the missing and the dead. I was there when I had to go back into my office in a hazmat suit. I was there when Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Governor George Pataki fought like hell with their staffs to keep the government running. I was there when Speaker Vallone worked with those gentlemen to keep the city and the state working and functioning. We had to do the council meetings, the emergency meetings at the New York Public Library, but we sustained ourselves and we went forward. And we regrew the city. We made the city stronger and better. And then what happened? You have administration, starting with the Obama administration, who forgot the lesson of history. When you have people who are dedicated to your destruction, you do not ignore them. You do not appease them. You do not say nice things about them. You fight like hell. You fight hard. You do not demonstrate weakness. You demonstrate strength, and you take them on, and you beat them. Because if you don't beat them, they will beat us. 23 years later, ladies and gentlemen of this audience, they are winning. They have the momentum all across the world. We watch Europe falling under pressure from Islamic fundamentalists. Sectors of their cities and their countries totally controlled by people not dedicated to becoming integrated citizens, but want to impose their own Sharia law and their values. That's what we're facing. We have a Biden administration following up on an Obama administration, which appeases and gives money. We have an Iran deal, which puts everyone at risk, and it's worse and worse every day. So I say to you, this is not a historical memory. This is a reality we're facing today. And in my humble opinion, it is worse today than it was back in 2001 when I was at City Hall. Jesse, your thoughts?
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you for what you did in that day. I myself was a young chief of staff to a first-term Congressman, Felix Grucci, from the 1st District. We were on our way back to Washington, D.C. Our flight was to take off of LaGuardia. But after the first tower was hit, those planes were canceled. And I remember being on the phone with my D.C. office and, getting us rerouted out of MacArthur. Those plans ended when the second tower was hit. It is a solemn day for me. Patriots Day, September 11th. I remember in the weeks, in the months, and the years after that I worked with a lot of the families, especially from Long Island and Suffolk County, of the first responders, the residents that were killed in that very vicious attack. And then, of course, we dealt with the families in trying to get them the health care they needed, who suffered from being at that pile for so long as we tried to rebuild ourselves. You're not wrong, Your Honor. That was, 8 years after the first attack, a bombing at the World Trade Center. And, those extremists continue. October 7th in Israel is just another example of this type of extreme terrorism that's going upon civilians of Western and freedom-loving societies. And we need to wake up. My fear, while I will never, ever forget that day, what it means on what happened that day, the heroism and the unification of our country that I witnessed in that day and the days that followed. I think the people, we have forgotten. We have forgotten what occurred that day to, almost 4,000 of our fellow neighbors. And what continues to happen as we're under assault, whether it be here or abroad. And we need, I think that President George W. Bush was the right person at the right time to be in the White House. It was for me, I believe it was divine intervention, because we needed someone who could unify the country and also be tough. Some of his policies in history in the years since the attacks on September 11th may not look so kindly on him, and some will. Some policies maybe were rushed too soon, and maybe in retrospect could have been modified so that they did not be as intrusive as some aspects of the Patriot Act would be. And maybe we never should, no, not maybe, we never should have named that act the Patriot Act. But he was steel-willed. He had a mission. He knew, prevent another attack on our shores. And we have been successful in avoiding that under his presidency. We need to remember what occurred on September 11th, learn and educate from the lessons we learned that day, and do everything in our power to prevent it from happening again. Because if there's one thing that's demonstrated, and October 7th is another demonstration of that in Israel, that appeasement never works. It's peace through strength.
Eric?
Yes, I remember that day really well. I rode in on the Metro North that morning with a very good friend of mine. I got off in Grand Central, walked to my office, and he continued down to on the subway to the World Trade Center. And when I heard about the attack, I tried to get in touch with him, and eventually, fortunately, I was able to. But he was standing on the plaza outside the World Trade Center describing to me as bodies were falling out of the buildings. People were jumping. And it's a day, obviously, that all of us, if you were alive that day, you'll remember for the rest of your lives, and particularly if you're in the city. We were in the middle of a war zone. And I want to applaud Jesse's comment about George W. Bush. What George W. Bush did, the fundamental change that he made that we are forgetting, is that during the first World Trade Center attack, it was treated as a criminal justice issue. It wasn't a crime. It was an act of war. And what George W. Bush did on September 11th is he changed the paradigm from prosecuting these guys as criminals, because you have the Egyptian sheikh still sitting in prison, is he changed it to an act of war, and the theory became, we're going to fight them there so they can't come here. And that paradigm has been enormously successful in the past 23 years. But what are we seeing now? The catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan has led to the reconstitution of not just the Taliban, but Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other terror groups in Afghanistan, because there's no strong central government to be able to control them. And to the extent that there's any alliance, it's between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. This idea that the lie that the Biden-Harris administration told us, we can leave because we have this over-horizon capability. We have no over-horizon capability. We have no idea what's going on there. We lost all our eyes and ears on the ground in Central Asia. We don't know, other than intelligence is telling us that this is the greatest single threat to the United States in terms of a terrorist attack, even before 9/11. But just to put a finer point on it, how inept and forgetful and disgraceful this administration is. Hamas took American hostages and has been holding American hostages and has murdered American hostages. And what was the Biden administration's response? To indict these animals. You don't indict these people. You kill these people. You go there and you take what's ours, and our citizens are ours. And if you get in the way, you're going to die. But this administration has completely lost this point. They are returning back to the idea that these are criminal justice issues. We can negotiate with terrorists. If they come here, we'll deal with it. And we're all in favor of de-escalation. But the only one de-escalating is the United States, because we are the ones who are now fearful. We have lost the ability to deter because nobody's afraid of us. That is why we have seen the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has its roots in the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan. That is why there was the October 7th attack, because of the appeasement of Iran and the weakness of the United States and the correct perception of the Iranian and their terrorist proxies that the United States is weak and in retreat and will not stand with Israel in a way that it needs to. And that is what has led to the attack on October 7th. And that is why we were seeing more hostile actions by China in the Pacific than at any time in history. So we have not learned the lessons of 9/11. To the extent that we have either forgotten or unlearned them. And that is why the world is in such an extraordinary, dangerous place.
Well, I want to just say to you, one of the people who should absolutely be commended for the work done to help the victims of 9/11 was Congressman Peter King, who's a friend of Chairman Garcia, a friend of Eric Levine, a friend of mine, a man of great courage, moral clarity, intellectual genius. He is the one who fought in Congress and got both sides of the aisle to support funding for medical treatment of the severely injured, the victims of 9/11. But even today, Jesse and Eric, firefighters, first responders, police officers, volunteers, EMS people who went there, rushed in and survived the explosions in the fallen towers. But 10, 20 years later, now 23 years later, they're still ill and dying of the terrible diseases that these fantastic extremists levied in this active war against the United States. And we should remember people like Peter King, who did the job of protecting America in a bipartisan way. So Peter should be commended for that. And Jesse hit it.
I need to echo those words, not to interrupt you, because Peter King, of all the members of the New York delegation or any of those delegations that were impacted by the attacks on September 11th, whether it be at the Pentagon or whatnot, Peter King was the leader amongst that group to ensure that these communities, and specifically here in New York, received its $20 billion when individuals were trying, and throughout the country, were trying to stop $20 billion from being spent here to rebuild New York after this tragic attack. He was the one who, I think days after the attack, himself, members of Congress, including Congressman Grucci, were gathered with first responders, police officers in a tavern in downtown New York, to find out what they needed, what needed to be done, how we could help, what obstacles they were facing. Peter King, even before that, was making his way to be an American icon. That day, he became an American treasure and hero.
That's absolutely right, Jesse. And I have to tell you something. People need to remember what led up to this. How did it come to pass that we were so vulnerable? It's because there was a protocol established by the Clinton administration where the intelligence agencies were barred from cooperating with law enforcement agencies. People forget that. That was one of the great gifts of the Clinton administration. The brains of America couldn't share information with each other. And as a result of that, agencies that should have been given heads up weren't given heads up. People who should have been coordinating their efforts weren't working together. And why did they do this? Because they wanted to be politically correct. And that caused a tremendous, tremendous price because we had the early warning of several years before on the first Trade Center attack. And Jesse, Eric is absolutely right. They knew it was going to happen again. The foreshadowing was there. We knew it was going to happen, and we didn't get ready. We took it as a one-off situation. It wasn't going to happen again. The people who were closest to the situation and understood this knew they were coming back at us. And I submit to you, every year on 9/11, the people here in New York City are apprehensive. Are they going to come back? And you have to understand the mentality of these extremists. Dates, anniversaries matter to them. They pick out times and places and symbols that matter to them. So the people of New York should go about their lives with courage and with dignity, but they should be concerned because they're fighting an adversary who's playing a long game, who has an agenda, will never be appeased until they have hegemony over Western civilization. That is the goal. That is the problem. We cannot allow that to go unchecked. And when we gave up that base in Afghanistan, Bagram base, when we gave that up, and it's just revealed in the last couple of days, all the technology, not only Trump wanted it all destroyed, and Harris, to his shame, is denying that reality. It was Trump who wanted it all destroyed. It was supposed to be destroyed. It wasn't. And some of it was technical equipment that allowed fingerprint and other identification devices against our allies in Afghanistan. And the Taliban then went and hunted these people down. So that's a shame on the Biden administration for doing that. Eric.
Well, on that, when we talk about the debate, we can talk about Trump's failure to make that point when it was his turn to talk about Afghanistan. But you say they're coming back. They're here. That is part of the problem with the open border. They're here. We know Hezbollah is in Venezuela and that the Hezbollah's operatives have crossed into the United States. We know Hamas operatives have crossed into the United States. And we know that people on the terror watch list have crossed into the United States and been released, and we don't know where they are. So terrorists are here. The question is when they will act. And as I said, we can talk about Afghanistan in the context of today when we discuss the debate between Trump and Harris and the shortcomings thereof.
Well, we're going to take a break. That's your coming attraction, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be talking about the great debate, or the not-so-great debate, of last night, 9/10/24, between the Vice President of the United States and the former President of the United States, and what we all made of it. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us for more important and interesting conversation in our next segment.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Get ready for Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, and Super Nintendo World. Now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, you had a little bit of a heads up, ladies and gentlemen, because we're now going into a discussion of the great debate, or the not-so-great debate, of 9/10/24, the first presidential debate of this campaign season. May be the one and only debate. We'll see. And let me give you my thoughts, then we'll go to Eric and then to Jesse.
Just don't cry. There's no crying on ABC Radio.
There's no crying in politics.
That's right. Never let them see you sweat or cry. Gentlemen, as I've said on numerous occasions on this show, this is a fight in this election for the survival of America and Western civilization. These are the highest stakes we've ever seen in a presidential election in my lifetime. It's comparable to the fight that the Allies had against the fascist Axis in World War II. This is very serious business. And so going into the debates, I had the following thoughts. Will Kamala Harris finally expose herself? What does she believe? What's her platform? What are her issues? Who's the real Kamala Harris? Because all she is a shadow. Fundamentally, I believe she's exactly what you think she is, if you've been following her career. She's a left-wing progressive out of California. She's somebody who's dangerous to the public policy in America for national interests. She's someone who's dangerous for national security for America, and she's dangerous to world peace throughout the world. That's who I think Kamala Harris is. And I think Bernie Sanders said it best on the Sunday talk shows when he said, look, she has to run as a moderate, but don't worry, folks, she'll come back to the left where she's a member of that family, which is exactly, by the way, how Biden ran his campaign. He ran as a moderate. He lied to us. He misrepresented. He went in pledging to unite this country, and he's the most divisive president in my lifetime, closely followed by Barack Obama. And what do you have? You have a weak country, a divided country, a country that's caving in to the extreme left, and we're in dire straits. And I expected Trump to rally to do what he had to do. What did that mean? He had to take his message to the American people. This was my record, and this is what I accomplished on economics. This is what I accomplished in national security worldwide. This is how I protected the border. This is how I made us energy independence. This is the faults of the Biden administration, and before that, the Obama administration. And Harris can't have it both ways. She either was the last person in the room, or she was a totally marginalized nobody who they barely tolerated. So she either was a player and a decision maker, or she was a nobody. In either event, she's unqualified to be president. If she's a nobody and she did nothing, she has no experience. But if she was, in fact, the decision maker, as she pretends she is and was, well, then she's responsible for all the failures. And when she says, let's go in a new direction, it's time for a change, give me a break, Kamala. What change? You're part of an administration that's failed this country disastrously. And we're exposed, we're naked, we're troubled, we're divided, and we're at risk like never before in our lifetime. Eric.
Yeah, so my three big takeaways are, one, that Kamala Harris is a vapid, substance-free liar. Two, that Donald Trump missed opportunity after opportunity after opportunity and constantly went off message because of his ego. And three, the two moderators were so patently in the tank for her that they made Candy Crawley look pro-Romney. It was really quite remarkable.
And Crawley being the one who interrupted
she went
Romney in the debate against Obama, where she incorrectly
Right. Romney was in the throes of body slamming Obama on Benghazi, and she interrupted Romney while he was speaking to say something factually inaccurate and just broke up all the momentum. And then from that point, Obama was able to recover. But that was the nature of the moderators throughout the process. I mean, for example, the very first question that they asked, decent question, they asked Kamala Harris, is the country better off today than it was 4 years ago? And then there was some babble that had nothing to do with the answer to that question. And there was no follow-up. There was no, well, he asked you a simple question, is the country better today than it was 4 years ago? So, of course, the logical response from Donald Trump would be to make that point. But he didn't. He went off on some tangent that was somewhat of a non sequitur. They asked about why she has changed her position so many times. And then she didn't answer that question. And it was like trying to get a substantive response from Kamala Harris was like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. It just can't be done. And then again, Trump has the opportunity to follow up and say, well, you asked her this question and she didn't answer it because obviously when she said in 2020 that she was against fracking, that's what she really meant. And today, for political reasons, she says that she is for fracking. And there are a couple of other examples. On abortion, they pressed Trump very hard on the abortion issue, which I actually thought he handled pretty well. And at one point, he had her on the defensive about what her position is on abortions in the 7th, 8th, and 9th month. And he said to the moderators, why don't you ask her about that? They ignored that and just kept pressing him. Will you sign an abortion ban? An abortion ban. And he's been very clear that he's not signing an abortion ban. He's been very clear it should be left to the states. But they refused to ask her that question and follow up. But what did Trump do when they asked questions about Afghanistan and about Israel and about Ukraine? She would try to deflect and make it sound like Afghanistan was all his fault. She would deflect and make it sound like the invasion of Ukraine was all his fault. And then she would kind of throw in this twist about the size of his rallies. And he would take the bait. And rather than pressing her on Israel, and of course the moderators, when they were pressing Trump on Ukraine, there was actually a question to him, do you think it's in our national security interest that Ukraine win? I happen to believe that it is in our national security interest that Ukraine win. My view is that the Biden administration has failed miserably in helping Ukraine win. But Donald Trump's answer is, I'm going to end that war in 24 hours if I'm elected, even before I take office. I mean, nobody believes that kind of response. It just doesn't make any sense. On Afghanistan, this was perhaps the single worst foreign policy catastrophe since World War II. And Trump wasn't really able to make hay of it because he was allowing himself to be distracted by other meaningless issues. They asked about January 6th. I've been on the record before, and I'll say it again. There is no justification for January 6th. It was not a legitimate form of protest, period, end of sentence, and Donald Trump's behavior on that day was disgraceful. But rather than trying to pivot away from it and talk about other issues, he went into trying to defend the indefensible. He lost the opportunity to hammer her on the failures abroad and hammer her on the failures at home. I mean, I think the one point that he made was quite good. That was that I think they'll be able to use in advertisements going forward is on fracking, because she really led with her chin on that. She absolutely is against fracking. They have a beautiful, clear, clean clip from her the 2020 campaign where she could not have been clearer that she's against fracking and that she will in fact ban it. Pennsylvania is probably the single most important swing state in this election. Fracking is a critically important industry in Pennsylvania, so they'll be able to make some hay of that. But Donald Trump was just so easily moved off. Took his eye off the ball repeatedly. he had the opportunity to eviscerate her constantly, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's the role in Gaza. I mean, I did notice that when they pressed him on, do you think the United States interest that Ukraine win? They did not say to her, do you think it's in the United States interest that Israel win? They never asked that question because she was very clear. We don't know what side of that war she's on because, it was terrible on October 7th. It was a terrorist attack and they raped women. Yeah, it's all horrible beyond words. But then she says there's 40,000 dead in Gaza. Well, why are there 40,000 dead in Gaza? Hamas is responsible for every single death in Gaza. A few points. One is that Hamas uses civilians as human shields to make sure, and they have stated this as policy publicly, to make sure that as many civilians die as possible so that they'll have pictures of dead babies and dead civilians for publicity to use against the Israelis. That's one. The second is people should keep in mind that in Iraq, during the battle for Fallujah, which took months, there was a death ratio of 3 civilians to every 1 terrorist. In Gaza, the Israelis have killed, there are 40,000 dead, the Israelis have killed 20,000 terrorists. That's 1-to-1. The Israelis have gone out of their way, at the risk of their own soldiers' lives, to spare civilians as best they can in the face of a terrorist organization that wants to make sure that their own people die. But Harris doesn't make that point. And Trump has it. It was given to him on a silver platter. And he didn't make that point. He has an unbelievable record on the Middle East to make. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan. He got out of the Iran nuclear deal. He killed Soleimani. And on the Jewish issue, he extended Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to apply to Jews so that you can fight the anti-Semitism on our college campuses. He made none of those points because he was more interested in the size of his rallies and wondering why people are so upset about January 6th.
Jesse.
In politics, this is a missed opportunity. No doubt about it. Kamala Harris did just enough that she needed to do, and she had some assistance. I think everyone universally, it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left, will say that she was given an assist and a boost by the ABC moderators. And when I say missed opportunity is that, the sugar high of dumping Biden and coronating Kamala Harris had leveled off. Her her momentum had leveled off. I do think that the tactical move to announce the RFK endorsement of Trump sucked the wind out of the nomination. Kamala Harris has accepted his nomination at the DNC that Friday. It sucked the red out. And we saw Trump then now surging and gaining the momentum in this race. If he was disciplined, I think the first 30 minutes he was good. He was staying on message. He was doing what he could do, especially on economics. And as it was going to on the economics, the economy, and as we were going into the border, and making the case that been there for 3.5 years and you've done nothing. You're promising this, but you could be doing it now. I think we could have seen a little bit more of that. Was the president distracted and took the bait? He certainly did. He certainly did. And as I said, right now, what we're going to see is probably a 1%, 1.5% change nationally in this debate for a week or two, and then it's going to level off as early voting begins in states like Alabama and Pennsylvania. But you know what? Both of you pointed out that there was a thumb on the scale. They interrupted, the moderators interrupted Donald Trump in a fact check 5 times.
And sometimes they were wrong. Sometimes their facts were wrong.
Sometimes, exactly, they were wrong, which is amazing. They did nothing of that to happen.
By the way, I'm amazed but not surprised, Jesse. Okay.
No, I'm not either. And let me just go, before I go on to this note, I was one of the people who were saying, just as I did back before the June 27th debate, I thought that CNN back then, for business practices, had to be fair so that they could get more eyeballs, more viewers, which means more ad money. I thought ABC had to do the same thing, and I was wrong. they did not care. So they fact-checked Donald Trump 5 times, and like you said, sometimes and they were wrong. Never once did they do Kamala Harris. So why don't we just fact-check it together a little bit? One of the fact checks, she's claimed that right now no member of the United States military who is on active duty in the combat zone is in danger. That's absolutely false. We have troops in the Middle East that are absolutely in the combat zone and under constant attack by Iran. I think
there have been almost 200 attacks on American service members in Syria and Iraq since October 7th, and we have not responded.
Exactly. So we're going to fact check Kamala Harris since ABC moderators wouldn't. Tonight, she also details the dangerous plan called Project 25. That is a Project 25 blueprint that is being put out by an independent group called the Heritage Foundation. It has no ties to Donald Trump. In fact, I do not know how much clearer Donald Trump could say that he is not involved in it, has not read it, he does not support it. Yet the moderators didn't fact check her. They didn't say to Kamala Harris, well, Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention and certain dates has already rejected that premise. The full page ad where he was calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys regarding the incident in Central Park. That occurred, if you remember, the Central Park 5. And he was not pointing that out. A woman was raped, and he was calling for the restoration of the death penalty. So basically, the ad said, bring back the death penalty, bring back the cops, bring back the police. He also said, and the biggest one is we talked about fracking, so that's clear set. But she also said something about carrying pregnancy to term and about asking on the abortion, and that's not happened. And you know what, Eric and Your Honor, I think you're right. Donald Trump answered that question consistently, as he has been, about exceptions. He is pro-life, but he supports exceptions for exceptions. And he also said very succinctly, he took credit for driving this back to the states, that now, instead of it being in a nebulous, under attack type of legal attack at the Supreme Court numerous times, bring it back to the states, let the people vote. We are voting to put this in. And in red states and in liberal states, this initiative is being placed in the hands of the people. And you know what? They are voting as they should. But the issue was about abortion that is not happening when women carrying pregnancies to term. The Daily Signal pointed out that in Minnesota, their 2015 law required doctors to report whether abortions resulted in live birth of a baby. In 2021, that happened at least 5 times. No measures were to keep them alive. It was in 2023 when her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, stripped that reporting requirement out of the bill. So, this goes on and on. We know the Charlottesville fact check was clear. It's been debunked. It's been corrected even over the last several years. They never say what Trump said, where he added, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Jesse,
I just
want to make this point, and we have to take a break. But it's very instructive that you say that, because they mischaracterize what Trump said in Charlottesville.
All the time. But
they deliberately misrepresent and omit what Harris has said, what Biden has said, what Walz has said, her vice presidential nominee, which is all those pro-Hamas demonstrators have a point. How many times have they said that? Walz, Harris, Biden, they have a point. They have a point putting babies in ovens, chopping people's heads off, raping and torturing women. They have a point. Those savages have a point. Give me a break, Harris, Walz, Biden. They have no point. This is Let the Record Show. We're taking a break. We'll be back for the third and final segment of this week's show. Please stay with us.
This is Let the Record Show.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like winding your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz.
Spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, and County Chair of the Suffolk Party, distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist, Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So I want to raise this issue because, there's an old cliche in politics that's all about the economy.
Stupid.
And that was invented by
Bill Clinton,
supposedly, or one of his brain trusts. Yeah. Whether it was Carville, I'm not sure.
I think it was Carville.
It's probably Carville. But I want to talk about the economy for a few minutes, gentlemen, because let me say we've been focused on national security. We've been focused on international relations and war. But if you don't have a strong economy, you don't have a strong country, because that enables you to take care of all the social programs and your national security and military defenses. Our Navy is in a weak position. We're having trouble with recruitment because of wokeism and that political correct nonsense. We need to have a strong, booming economy. And I will say to you, quoting such luminaries as Larry Kudlow and Steve Moore and Steve Forbes, you don't overregulate, you don't overtax. The way you have a good economy is you let the capitalist system work, you broaden the economic base for everyone, and you don't discourage investment. You do not have a program that discourages investment and takes over economic decision-making, not by the market, but by status, by central government authorities who traditionally, whether it's a fascist right-wing regime or a communist or a socialist regime on the left, they always get it wrong. Just as they've gotten it wrong with respect to electric cars, which only a fraction of the people want, and it's being forced down our throats by these people who keep telling you this election's all about freedom and liberty, while they're shoving down your throat that you can't get a gas-powered car. And they're going to make them unaffordable and stop their production, and using regulatory devices to make it impossible to get the EPA mandates. So let's have a real conversation. So let me talk to you about a list that I compiled. And as Eric and I walked into the studio, we came across Steve Moore today, a noted commentator on WABC on Saturdays, as well as on Fox Business Office.
No, he wasn't on the sidewalk homeless. He was actually in the studio.
He was right here.
Okay.
He was right here. On a park bench, on a park bench in the studio.
Okay.
So I read to Steve my list. And I said, Steve, you're the economist. I'm just a a humble and not so humble lawyer, what do you think of my list? I said, since I've glommed it from you, so let me give you my list, Jesse and Eric, because I think each of them is worthy of real concern, and we really need to focus on what a Harris-Walz administration will be like in terms of the economic future of this country. First of all, the Trump tax cuts are going to expire at the end of 2025. So if they expire, that in and of itself is a tax increase. It's a tax rise. Okay? Separate and apart from that, she wants to raise taxes anyway. Who does she want to raise taxes on? On corporations. Well, when you raise taxes on corporations, folks, that's passed on to the consumer, and that's inflationary. So you're paying more dollars for the same amount of goods. It's causing inflation. It's ridiculousness. But she wants to raise taxes. She wants to go after the so-called wealthy. Meanwhile, the so-called wealthy, the 1% or the 5% or 10%, produce the vast majority of the revenues for this country. It could be as high as, 75 or 80% of the taxes come from those groups across this country, both federal taxes, state and local taxes. Who do you think is supporting the economy? The millions of flying through our borders being subsidized by taxpaying loyal Americans? No. So she wants to tax unrealized capital gains. You know what that does? I buy a house for $750,000. The market goes up. It's now worth $1.5 million. They tell me I now have to pay the difference, that $750,000 increase. I have to pay that in unrealized capital gains.
It's okay. You just sell your house to pay it.
That's right. I haven't sold the house, but I have to pay taxes on it. Or, Jesse, I buy a stock for 10. It goes up to 20. I don't sell it, but I have to pay the increase of the 10, even though I haven't sold it. So I have to sell the stock, as Eric just pointed out, to pay the tax. And they do this year after year after year. It's a confiscation and redistribution of wealth. It's idiocy. Next, national rent control. What is a great lesson throughout the world of rent control? All it does is create less housing, higher rents, destabilization of the markets. Another dumb idea that she's pushing. That's her great economic plan. Oh, government subsidies for green energy. Tell me where it's worked. They throw billions of dollars, trillions of dollars in all these phony programs, some of which Biden just admitted it was supposed to be COVID relief for anti-inflation. We're really subsidizing green energy, which is the secular religion of the crazy left. They don't work. You need to have a diverse body of energy sources. If you think you're going to rely on solar and wind to give you air conditioning and heat and take care of all the needs for all the products and all the services we have, you're kidding yourselves. They want to ban fracking and fossil fuels. Oh, that's great. So you're going to give up the control of that market to the Iranians and to the Russians. That's great, since these people are absolutely dedicated to helping America destroy itself, that is. So you're going to give that up when you should be energy independent. Reparations. She supports reparations. Who's going to get reparations? I don't know about you, Jesse and Eric, but I never had a slave. My forefathers never had a slave. Who am I paying reparations to? How are you going to fund that?
Well,
who gets it, and where are you going to get the money for it?
My grandparents were being bludgeoned by the Tsar when they were their slaves.
Right. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing with reparations. Forget about the fact it's economically impossible to provide for. It's the most divisive thing in the world. It makes people enemies of each other. Am I getting mine, and are you getting mine? It's awful. So that's my view of the idiocy of Ms. Harris, the empty pantsuit candidate for the presidency of the United States, her economic policies. Eric.
Well, I wish Trump had made the argument as articulately as you did. There would have been a much more persuasive debate. I mean, some of the things you left out. She doesn't like high prices. But of course, what causes the high prices are inflation. But not according to her. It's price gouging. I have yet to hear any example of this price gouging. But she has a plan. That's all we know. And her plan seems to be Soviet-style price controls. And when liberal media like the Washington Post pointed that out, that it's a really dumb idea, her response was, okay, never mind. I take that back. You know, they brag about their jobs reports. Well, let's remember that this is one point that Trump made. Let's give him credit. They had to reduce by over 800,000 jobs the number of jobs allegedly created.
818,000. But who's counting?
Exactly. In the last quarter. And most of the jobs that were they quote unquote created were bounce back jobs. These are jobs that existed before the pandemic that came back once the pandemic went away. And to the extent that they've created additional jobs, most of those jobs are government jobs. They're not in the private sector. They're crushing the private sector.
And it doesn't include, by the way, people who have to now work 2 or 3 jobs.
Right. Because the balance of the other jobs, for the most part, that they've created are these low-paying menial jobs that aren't really careers that people, that really create wealth for people. I just want to come back to the point you made about unrealized gains. It also is ripe for abuse. A house, all right, you can generally get a sense. It makes no sense on any level, but with a house, at least you can compare it to other homes. You can generally fix the price of the home. You can get a sense of it. But let's assume you own a piece of artwork. How do you value a piece of artwork?
Whatever the IRS tells you it's worth.
Exactly. So someone owns a piece of art, and they say, you know what? I think this thing's worth $100,000, and it hasn't appreciated in value. And the IRS decides, you know what? We think that painting's worth $250,000, and you have to pay $150,000 in taxes. And we also talk about lawfare and weaponization. We also think that you intentionally didn't tell us that it was worth $250,000, that you really knew it was worth $250,000. Now, lo and behold, you're going to have criminal prosecutions.
But it's not a problem because they'll let you off the hook like they'll let Hunter off the hook.
Yeah, so it's really ripe for abuse. And that's something that people really should be watching out for. Another point on this inflation issue, you alluded to it. The Inflation Reduction Act was sold to the American people by Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer as by a bill that will reduce inflation. And Kamala Harris was the deciding vote in passing the bill. And of course, what the bill did, it caused inflation because it flooded all kinds of money towards green energy into the economy. And it is only now that Kamala Harris is coming clean on the issue that we didn't pass this bill to reduce inflation. We passed this bill so we can advance the green agenda. It was a green agenda bill. It had nothing to do with reducing inflation. These are all points that were available to Donald Trump to bludgeon her with and just eviscerate her at the debate. But because he was so worried about
the size of his crowd,
nobody leaves my rallies. You know what, Mr. President? Who cares? Stop it. Stop talking about these meaningless pieces of garbage. Talk about issues and talk about her record, and you win. And if you don't, you're going to lose.
Jesse.
Well, you've ticked off the 818,000 big jobs that were eliminated. That most of the jobs were government jobs that were driving this economy, and bounce back jobs at that, and the part-time jobs that are really out there. But all we have to do is, and you're right, the American people, though, whether they see it at a debate, they see it in mail or on a TV commercial, they see it every day. They go and pump their car. They see the impact of the Kamala Harris economy and its failures when they go to the grocery shelves and the checkout counter. When they look in their shopping carts as they're buying some school supplies, or they shudder when they get their insurance bills. You know, it's been discussed in different areas, but about $10,000 to $12,000 more a year it's costing Americans over the last 3.5 years. And we have to look at the overall prices increases since Kamala Harris took office. Overall prices have gone up 20.2%. Food prices, 21.6%. Rent, 22%. Electricity, 31.7%. The one difference, whether someone did not take the opportunity at a debate or whether someone gets a piece of mail, the American people are going to be voting this year with their pocketbook. And when they go to these stores and have to pay their bills, it's costing them $10,000 to $12,000 more than it did 4 years ago. That's going to be the defining factor. I think we have to ensure that is a defining factor in every way that this campaign can do, not just for the candidate, Donald Trump, or the even Republican Party, which I love as much as I love my family. It's for this republic. It's for the future of this country that we need to tack away. I'd rather have a mean tweet or maybe not a combative president if I get his policies back that secured, home prices going up 2.7%, personal savings increasing by 385%, or credit card delinquency dropping by 11%, and real wages rising by 8.2%. This is about the economy. It's about pocketbook issues. We need to articulate that. We need to make sure that the people have that, because these are real world problems happening to the middle class.
Eric.
One of the points we forgot to make, and I think this really captures the ineptitude of
our ineptitude or somebody else's.
Well, if she's elected, it's our ineptitude. But her plan to give $25,000 to new home buyers.
Yeah, what does that do?
All that does is, if you're the seller, you jack up the price of your home by $25,000. So now the thing is incredibly inflationary. Now, so the homes are more expensive. Inflation rises. Interest rates now go up. It becomes more difficult to get a mortgage. And now people can't buy homes again. So they need additional money on top of the $25,000. It completely wipes it out. It is I don't want to say it's the dumbest, because there's so many dumb ideas. It's hard to rank them. But these are such substantive issues and things to attack at the debate. They're just laying out there for Trump to go after. Mr. President, stay on message. Stay on message.
Absolutely.
All right. So let me ask you this question, gentlemen. The general view, conventional wisdom is that the person who thinks they did less well at the debate asks for another debate. That's conventional wisdom. The reporting, as we speak here today amongst ourselves, is that the Harris campaign says they want a second debate. So, Jesse, you're the political expert in this room. What do you make of that?
It's a tactical move. What happens is she's going to be able to win one way or the other on this issue, or that's what their attempt is. Number one, they want to challenge and be the aggressor in a debate and hoping that Donald Trump will not debate. Or if he accepts, they're going to deny the request of it, whether it's on Fox News or the rules and regulations that they're going to put forward as part of it. They're trying to do the best of both worlds. They made the challenge. They've opened it up. If he accepts, they'll make sure they derail any debate from moving forward. And if he doesn't debate, they'll call him a coward.
Or if they do a debate, it'll be in a friendly venue, another in the bag venue like ABC. Eric.
Let me take issue with the entire premise of the debate structure. Now, I happen to think Donald Trump should try to debate Kamala Harris again, because if he can stay on message, I think he can win. But what I think we need to get away from is this concept of moderators picking topics. Who are these people? Who cares about them? It's the candidates who are running a campaign. They know what issues they want to run on, and they know the weakness of their adversaries. They should be choosing the topics to discuss, rather than having the moderators choosing topics, following up, challenging, doing fact checks. I would propose that each candidate gets 3 minutes at the beginning to talk about whatever topic they want to talk about. And then after each one talks, the other can challenge what they said and take issue with it. And then each one can take turns asking the other one a question and then responding to that answer. That's a real debate. Having these people who are in the tank for one candidate or another to talk about issues that a lot of people don't really care about. I mean, the amount of time they spent on issues like January 6th. I mean, look, it's a legitimate topic given, Trump's performance.
But not for half the show.
But not for as long as it went on. And I really think you take a lot of the wind out of the sails of these moderators, because they're not neutrals. Let's be honest. They are not neutrals. They are partisans. And partisans have no role in debates because they have picked sides. And this happens time and time again. It's the exception when you have a neutral doing a debate. So I would propose that I do a debate, but that the structure of the debate be fundamentally changed.
Well, Ava's just given us the signal, gentlemen. It's time to say goodbye this week. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I hope you've enjoyed this low-keyed conversation amongst the three of us. And we welcome you back for next week's show. God bless you, your families, and, of course, God bless this great country, our America. Thank you.
This is Let the Record Show.